Hey there, how are you? It is nice to see you. We've got a really good show for you this evening. We're going to talk to two reporters who cover a lot of inside stuff in the city of New York and the borough of the Bronx. And so let's get started with a reporter from the city, Reuven Blau. Reuven, nice to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
I was just expressing to you just before the show, you you have the honor of covering what I think is just one of the greatest disasters in New York, and that is Rikers Island. Um, let's just get right to it. The city announced that they will no longer announce or report publicly anyone who dies in Rikers Island. So, therefore, all kinds of who knows what's happening could be happening, and people dying in there, and nobody will know about it. Somehow this doesn't work for me, but what do you think?
Yeah, so just a little bit of history for for your audience.
Yeah, sure.
So what typically happens is the city of New York, when somebody passed away, would send out a press release to the reporters, just kind of giving them basic information like the name of the person, the facility, the time of death, and if there's any other kind of basic information, in regards to the fatality or the person's passing. This practice started in the last 6 months of the De Blasio administration under Commissioner Vincent Giraldi, who is a reformer. When Eric Adams took over, he appointed Louis Molina. He asked Vincent Giraldi to leave, and it was kind of a controversial decision somewhat because even the new mayor is allowed to kind of change staff. Vinny Giraldi had actually asked to stay on and was kind of seen by the activists and reformers as a real reform-minded commissioner. And there's been a lot of attention. The year before, there was 19 deaths on Rikers Island or in the other city jail lockups, and that was actually the highest rate in about 25 years. So each death was highlighted by the media. Would get a lot of attention. And now the city is saying, look, we've changed our policy. Somebody just recently passed away. He was in the medical unit. It's called PACE. And he jumped off a tier in the unit and passed away shortly thereafter. And there was no press release. And there's a new press spokesperson. His name is Frank Dwyer. He came over from the FDNY. And I asked him, I said, hey, why didn't you put out a press release announcing this person's passing? And he said, look, we are not doing that anymore. And his explanation was, this is a change in, it was a practice, it wasn't a policy, and now we are changing the practice. And he also pointed out, he said, look, we do notify multiple different groups, including 7 different bodies. And out of the 7, it's, I think 4 or 5 of them are in the Department of Correction. It's, the investigative unit, the chaplain who has to kind of notify the family. But these groups don't necessarily always let press or media know. And
of course,
they do have to kind of list it at the end of the year. But again, there's a lot of time that passes from then. And they also do let the city's Board of Correction know, which is the oversight agency. And again, which is a group that doesn't always necessarily notify the media or is aware to notify the media, and the state AG's office. The one thing that people are saying is that, look, what does this really mean? I mean, ultimately, reporters like yourself have sources. They're going to find out and know about these fatalities. And that is correct. Generally speaking, especially now, there's a lot of attention on Rikers. We're going to find out about this stuff. But there has been times where it doesn't always happen. And I actually had heard from a former PR person who worked for the department who told me years ago they were waiting for my call and they had a statement ready to go about someone who had passed away. And I never did because I wasn't told. I wasn't notified.
Here's what my take is from hearing. I mean, I've known a lot of this history is if they do that, rather than have the attitude, we have problems here, we want to work to solve them, we want to engage the public, we want to, do whatever we can. This sounds like we have problems, we just don't want to tell anybody about it. And that suggests to me that a place that is, by all accounts, an absolute horror show. Happily, I have never been in there and I've never visited there. I suppose I would appreciate a visit at some point. But that just suggests to me that we're not looking to solve problems. We're looking to cover up problems. And as a journalist, as a talk show host, as a reporter, and as a citizen, that is very disturbing when, you've got very difficult, all the stories that emerge, not only deaths, all the stories are just so disturbing that come out of right. So that's my impression of it, that the specifics that you deal with every day is one thing, but the general thing that this is out of control is now it's underscored to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone would say that it's hard to, change something when you don't acknowledge the issue exists, and if you're not going to acknowledge, deaths is really the final moment where so many things usually go wrong when it comes to that.
Yeah, and there are so many reasons why it could be somebody smuggled drugs. It could be, they're having some reaction to not getting the drugs. It could be a violent thing. It could certainly be a mental health thing. It could be somebody who's literally going crazy psychologically, being in jail and being in this client. Could be anything. I want to ask you about this aspect of it. I have to giggle a little bit that the federal monitor's name is Steve Martin. We assume it's not the famous Steve Martin, who is a wonderful comedian. But at this point, as just somebody who talks to people like you and reads the newspapers and tries to follow what's going on, I think it's time for somebody to step in, because this is out of control. And this last bit is an example of it.
Yeah, I mean, so just again, also kind of back it up for the audience.
Yes, please do.
There's a federal monitor that's been in place since 2015, based on a kind of a class action lawsuit that was filed by a group of people who were locked up, who were being abused, the younger inmates, and that was also joined by the Southern District of New York, the federal prosecutor in Manhattan. And their solution was to this case, where they found all these abuses going on, was to appoint this federal monitor. And what he essentially does is he issues these reports about once or twice a year, 2-3 times a year, actually. And it's been progressively worse, right? Like, since he's been in place, he's been saying, hey, the violence is worse. A whole litany of kind of metrics that they look at have just gotten worse and worse. So there's been a real call now to have the federal judge say, enough of the monitor. It isn't working. It's been since 2015. Let's appoint a federal receiver who would potentially take over and start from scratch and have a ton of power to kind of do, kind of enact these reforms that people are calling on for.
Are you aware that this has been done, or would this be a very unusual thing for a federal monitor to take over a jail? Certainly one in New York City. But do they do this sort of thing, or would this be really, a stick out, stand out moment? I don't know. I'm just asking.
Yeah, that's a great question. There has been federal monitors. There's actually one in California. Currently, over the jail system, over the healthcare of prisoners, state prisoners.
Okay.
There's one in Mississippi, I believe. There was one in Chicago over the juvenile, the younger detainees. And that was actually a pretty big success. I mean, it takes time. It's not an overnight situation.
Yes, of course. Well, here's the other thing connected to it, and I want to ask you about another article that you wrote. Here's the other thing connected to it. Of course, they're talking about closing down Rikers, so it's almost like the federal monitor take it over, reorganize it. But that's not going to happen right away. We're still a few years away from really being able to do that. I just think some oversight needs to be done. And here's the headline: secrecy on severe jail injuries spur Rikers monitor to sound alarm. And this is the kind of thing that can't be accepted. And this is in your work. Detainee at city's floating jail, which is the Vernon C. Bain Center, on a boat, was on life support for 2 weeks after he was tackled by a guard. Now, maybe it was the only way to deal with this person and the problem, but we all should know about these things. And of course, if something improper was done with the guard, we also should all know, and of course the people in corrections and even the union should want to have a guard who's misbehaving taken out.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to say. It's just crazy stuff, man. Go ahead. I'm just throwing it at you. I'm out of words for it.
Yeah. I mean, I think, one of the biggest things the union has said for a long time is that, like, we are unfairly kind of accused here, and our voices don't count as much, and they're kind of drowned out. But at the same time, when there are reforms that are proposed and changes, they have opposed, almost everything that has come out in the last decade or so, or if not longer, about, kind of trying to improve things. This is an example of that. Is, if there was body camera footage, potentially, it would actually help kind of clarify what happened with this detainee who was tackled twice, including once it apparently appears when he was shackled. Again, if they were wearing body cam, I think, there is some footage, but it's unclear. It's blocked. Some parts of the incident are blocked based on where they were standing. So, I mean, again, if, some of these reforms were actually enacted earlier, if they are rightfully arguing that, like, they had done nothing wrong, this footage would make that very clear. And it just doesn't exist right now.
Another item in your piece is the plain numbers, and that is that in 2016 there were 74 serious injuries from use of force, and hold your breath. In 2022 there were 434 serious injuries. Boy, if that's not an indication that there's a problem. I do want to just mention, you and I were talking about it before the show. There was a story in the Daily News of kind of a whistleblower within the system who sent emails through the system to try and say, hey, there's a problem here. And now that person was suspended. That is an indication that what I said at the beginning, they don't want to solve any problems. They just want to cover them up. Like, we got problems, but let us deal with it. It's kind of the wrong way to go about it.
Yeah. I mean, and some of this is going to be aired out. The judge has ordered a hearing on Tuesday, and to kind of ask the department to kind of explain. There's 5 incidents that were flagged, including this one where somebody was paralyzed, and these 2 deaths. So, some of that will be aired out, hopefully. And I think people are expecting on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, at this federal hearing.
We only have about a minute, so let me just ask your personal thought about what should be done. Are you in favor of a federal monitor, or just let it go till we can close it down? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think I defer to what other experts have said, and and in this case, I talked to the federal monitor who handled the juvenile system, the reform of juvenile system in Chicago, and he had a great line that stuck with me. And he said, "Look, it takes courage. It takes a judge to have some courage to actually understand that the previous commissioners, there's been a lot of previous commissioners, and none of them have come in and said, we want to make the place worse. They've all tried to make things better, and none of them have accomplished in across the board improving the situation. So, there's a history here of it all working.
That's an indication that the system is larger than the goodwill and the even talent of some of the people who are trying to solve it. Listen, Reuven Blau, a reporter We Can See the City, reporting for New Yorkers. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your great work. Listen, if not for you, we'd really would have anything. And we'll keep reading all your great work in the city. Say hello to all our friends over there, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks again for having me.
Okay, folks, we'll take a very short break, and then after we take that break, we're going to go to Gotham Gazette. We'll be right back.
Hey, boss. Okay?
I said I'm fine.
See you in the morning with the frosted Superman, but it wasn't on it, and we lost it.
You can talk to me.
It's been really, really hard for me.
I'm an ex-drug dealer, and I'll be your sub today. Can you see anything different as a pill?
No.
You don't know?
Fentanyl is being mixed into everything now. There's only one thing that will save somebody's life. That is naloxone nasal spray.
Fentanyl, it's cheap, it's potent, and it's profitable.
Why would drug dealers put a lethal dose of fentanyl in drugs if they know it's so harmful?
Really just all about the money.
I just didn't realize that one pill could change your whole life.
More kids should know.
STEM is everywhere. Like here, behind the scenes of The Walking Dead.
When we break down clothes, we tumble it with trisodium phosphate, rock salt, and dish detergent.
We stitched together images of our model and created a 3D set that can be walked through in a VR headset.
We're able to turn 12 walkers into 1,000 walker hordes.
STEM can create new worlds on and off the screen. What will you make with STEM? Get inspired at shecanstem.com.
Man, it's lonely. Like, going through life's lonely.
There is the therapeutic aspect of music, just expressing how you feel. I'm going to talk to Howie about his feelings, make it into a song.
All right, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. I'm thrilled about this program because we have two great reporters. Let's right now go to Ethan Geringer-Sameth, who is a reporter with Gotham Gazette. Nice to see you, Ethan. How you doing?
Hey, Gary. Good to see you too.
And I say again, because you reminded me that literally 6 years ago you were on the program before you even were like a full-fledged reporter.
That's
and
great.
So that's nice to have you. Let's just get right to it. The headline of your article asks the question, and I'm going to ask the same question because it really was a confusing thing that you helped unravel. Where is the state legislation at the center of Mayor Adams' Jordan Neely response? And so explain to me, number one, what did the mayor say? And two, what legislation do we need from the state to kind of tie up all those loose ends?
Mm-hmm. So after a little over a week of questions about how the city was going to respond to Jordan Neely's
Yeah, we should mention that Jordan Neely was the man who was either begging or annoying passengers on a subway train and then was choked to death. But go ahead.
Yes.
I mean, people remember his name. Yes.
Right. Jordan Neely was choked to death after what witnesses say were basically decompensating. He had a history of mental illness on the train, was decompensating, and he was choked to death by a man named Daniel Penny, who was a white Marine veteran who's since been indicted charged with manslaughter
by
Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. So about 10 days after this incident, Jordan Neely's killing, Mayor Adams spoke finally at length. I think there was a bit of anticipation about how he was going to respond to this, and really say what the city was going to be doing about.
Especially because he's a former cop, tough on crime, and this was gets right into the guts of that discussion. Go ahead.
Right, and since he took office last year, he's really been focused on this intersection between untreated severe mental illness and substance.
Oh, that's right. Yes, of course.
So this is a big theme of his tenure. So in his response, he said that really what the city needs is more power from state lawmakers to be able to commit people to, hospitalize people for psychiatric holds,
right.
Or also to obtain court-ordered outpatient treatment, which usually entails some type of drug regimen and
potentially mental health, certainly mental health support. So city council legislation wouldn't be able to handle that. That has to go into Albany.
What the mayor is saying is that they need to make changes to the state mental hygiene law, which would have to be done by Albany law.
Okay.
So
I'll accept that.
And Governor Hochul, yeah. That law is what outlines, at the crux of this is how we define whether someone is a danger to themselves.
Or to others, of course.
Or to others. What the mayor is looking for is an expansion of that definition, or really to codify into that definition that danger to yourself could include failure to take care of basic life needs, failure to feed and clothe yourself, to house.
Right. And so those definitions have to come out of Albany.
Correct.
And do the legislators up there, I mean, are they engaged in this question? Is that one of the issues here?
Well, that's what we set out to find out. At this announcement, the mayor said that they were pushing for legislation, what he called the Supportive Interventions Act,
right.
That would do some of what we talked about. It would change the definition of self-danger. It would make it easier or it would really provide guidance to hospitals to consider a person's long-term care, not just whether they've stabilized in the moment. And it would also expand Kendra's law, which is what I mentioned earlier, a law that allows for court-ordered outpatient treatment.
Right. But now then, if I remember your article correctly, the question is, did he really advocate for this when he was up in Albany and in other official interactions with the governor or the legislators, whatever. If I recall, the answer was, not really.
Right. Yeah, that's what we found out. We started asking questions about
Nosy reporters.
we wanted to know the specific language of the bill. We wanted to
Mhm.
know whether it had actually been introduced into the legislature formally with a legislative sponsor and a bill number. What we found out is that nothing has been introduced yet along those lines. At the time of our conversation now, we only have a few days left in the state legislative
That's
session.
right. Right.
Really not a
So if
lot.
it's not now, then it's going to wait until the next cycle. I guess after the first of the year, I guess. Is that what we're talking about? Wow. So, so even though the legislation is interesting and defining this very, difficult thing that has many lines and, what falls under what category could be a very important thing. And then given the nature of life in the city, you could see how this could be important in a lot of cases. Mayor talked a good game. I don't want to blame him necessarily, but he didn't really follow up, and the legislature is not engaged in the process yet.
Now, we have heard from one assembly member, Ed Braunstein, who says he is working on a piece of legislation along these
Okay.
lines. It hasn't been introduced yet, so we'll see whether that
Whether it works out. Let's just move on. I want to get to other stuff that you've written for Gotham Gazette, and let's talk about a day without human services. I thought this was fascinating because we deal on this program and all of BronxNet's programs with a lot of not-for-profits. There are about 1,200 in the Bronx, and they're always complaining there's just not enough funding. I don't know how else you can describe it. We don't have enough money. And finally, the Human Services Council said, we're going on strike, just like anybody else who says we need more money or, a union or whatever. Where is that at now? That happened already, or it's going to happen? Where are we at? And just give us the idea, because I think it's very interesting.
Sure. So the day itself has happened. The idea was a day without human services. It was sort of a human service providers going on strike, ceasing to offer what they call life-saving essential services.
Right.
Obviously people rely on these services, so they made provisions to make sure that no one was falling through the cracks or going a day without a home delivered meal or something like
Food,
that.
yeah, of course.
But there were there were services that they suspended, and the purpose of this was to demonstrate what it would look like without needed cost of living adjustments for these providers. What they're saying are needed cost of living adjustments, and that's sort of reflected in workforce shortages kind of across the board.
How successful is the effort, other than getting people like us to talk about it on TV? That's one thing, but did it make an impact? Did was there any measurable sense that, wow, it really did impact our city? Or is one day just not enough? I mean, you close an after school center, you'll find impact,
Well, it sort of remains to be seen. I mean, this is all unfolding during city budget negotiations, which are ongoing between the mayor and the city council. The providers, which are led by a group called the Human Services Council, which is sort of an umbrella organization representing providers, they're seeking a 6.5% cost of living adjustment in the next city budget.
For the workers, for the people who work there, or also the kind of funding budget for everything they do?
This would be for city contracted human services providers, which
I see.
Bulk of city human services.
And so this is a budgetary thing, and we may see that one way or the other July 1st. Is that what allegedly July 1st?
Right. That's the goal. That's the start of the city fiscal year. The mayor put out a $106.7 billion executive budget. The council has now held hearings examining that, and now we're
stick around. Yeah. Stick around or keep reading Gotham Gazette with our buddies Samar Kershid and Ethan Geringer-Sameth. Last thing I want to ask you about, where I have a couple of minutes, is, and I'm personally a big supporter of summer youth employment. I think it's one of the answers to getting kids engaged, having them grow up better, keeping them off the streets in the summer. I guess we in the Bronx should be proud that Councilmember Althea Stevens, who's a Bronx council member, the chair of the council's youth services committee, is pushing forward a bill to set a goal for each city agency to offer summer youth employment jobs. Where is that at? Has the bill gone through? I hadn't heard that it passed. What's up? I don't know.
So the bill has passed.
The bill has passed.
What it would do is it would basically require, it actually wouldn't require anything. It sets a goal that each city agency opens up a certain number of summer youth employment slots within each agency, and it pegs that to a proportion of the total headcount of that agency. It's unclear exactly how that might impact the total number of participant slots.
Right.
The program has been growing under Adams. It's reached 100,000.
He has shown a great interest in summer youth employment. I think for obvious reasons. I'll tell you a couple of things. I think about our youth, high school kids. Number one, there are a lot of kids who want to be serious, but they have no opportunity to be serious. And having them walk into City Hall or some other, office, agency office, working, even watching how the Department of Sanitation works. This is a very good thing. It's good for the kids because it raises their profile, and it's good for all of us. I'm just going to tell you a real quick story. We did a show on my other program, Bronx Talk, about voter literacy. And one of the things that one of the experts said was that kids are not getting civic education in college. And this would be a way, I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of kids you could engage in civics. If you ask me, I vote yes. I think it's just a great thing. So you're saying that it wasn't required, but it's a goal just to start the process going, because you don't want to tie them down on some youth employment. They can't get their work done.
Right. And it also establishes reporting requirements. So we can...
It establishes what? A reporter?
Reporting requirements for
the
program, so we can see the total number of slots and where they're placed, public and private, and also the city agencies where people are following.
Got it. Listen, Ethan, you're a superstar as far as we're concerned. We can't learn anything without you. I learned all this stuff from you, reading it and now talking about it. Ethan Geringer-Sameth, he's a reporter with Gotham Gazette. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time, and you can be sure we'll call you sooner than 6 years to come back.
Looking forward. Thanks a lot.
Great. All right, folks, that will do it for us on the Bronx Buzz. Thanks to Reuven from the city and his fine work. And thanks to Ethan. And, we just keep cranking it out, and we will see you next week. Good night. Stay safe.